Well, I really had a hard time figuring out what I was going to do, and I almost backed out of the last minute. I finally came up with something. Nobody told me that this was supposed to be really funny, so... well, maybe my trip to Sarnia a couple weeks ago. Everybody likes slides and vacations, right? So. But then I thought, what was I thinking? Who would be interested in that? So I thought, well, maybe some other trip that I took. Yeah, that would be. My trips to the Grande Ballroom, from 1966 to 1971. It was kind of a challenge to see if I could remember. I'm not really sure. So this was kind of I did some research on the web, but I'm gonna get away from the script and just sort of do a Rorschach, because mainly this is about the posters of that period that I'd gone on the web and pulled off, a long time ago. So saving some work. Didn't have to do any fancy graphics like these. But that last slide was a picture of the MC5. This concert was when they released their first album, Kick Out the Jams and blank, blank, blank. But I did attend that concert, and so I actually thought at first that, here's Iggy Pop too. So he was another icon that stands out in my mind of him flying across the room and stuff like that. And I didn't really care for the theatrics and stuff. But, his music was pretty good. It had a good beat. It was easy to dance to. So the girls really liked him, I guess, And the funny thing about Iggy is that he must have the award for longevity, because when Matthew Stroh was here doing the retagging project, and Matthew's fairly young, right? Iggy had just announced a tour, right? So this is 40 years later, and he was all excited about it. And I met another guy who's like a programmer someplace, and can't wait for the Iggy concert, But I do think somebody needs to tell him that at his age, he just needs to start wearing a shirt. This is a picture of the Amboy Dukes, and I don't know, you probably know who Ted Nugent is, but they had this big hit, Journey to the Center of the Mind, and it kind of launched Ted Nugent's career. So here's where we're going to get into some of the poster stuff. But before we go into just the graphic stuff, some background is probably important here. A lot of the concerts at the time were announced by the Trans-Love Energies. And, if you don't know who they are, they were like the tribal council, and that's the reason for the little Indian word right there, of a group of an organization, a hip organization, that included this Hill Street commune. And they're sometimes called the MC5 commune, sometimes called the White Panthers. Okay, so I thought that news of what I was doing here leaked out, and that's why they delicious thing, because we were all pinkos back then. At any rate, this is a group of the people, and it looks very familiar to what my friends used to look like back then. And so, in part of that period was John Sinclair, who, along with Uncle Russ Gibb, was responsible for bringing a lot of the groups in of that period, national, international acts, and of course he got busted. A narc had infiltrated the Trans-Love Energies, and so he got busted. And they did concerts for him, and then he actually had John Lennon and Yoko Ono at Chrysler Arena doing something for him. But just to demonstrate that the dream is not dead, after all this time, that's his new website. So you could get, I guess, diagnosed to maybe get medical marijuana. So maybe. He looks pretty much the same. His hair's just white. Sort of in the spirit of the times, Commander Cody was a band I really like, because I was starting to get into country music then, and I think theirs plus their anthem Lost in the Ozone Again was one of the great anthems of the drug culture, along with Don't Bogart That Joint, that was from the soundtrack of Easy Rider. This gets a little serious. I mean, not really serious, but this is kind of the grandfather or the godfather of British blues rock. So if you don't know who John Mayall is, I was really into music and still am. But he was responsible for a lot of people in his band, the Blues Breakers, who became later more famous than he did. And here's a picture of him at the Grande, at a concert I attended. And here's one of the people that was in the band at the time, Mick Taylor, who actually took the place of Brian Jones, when Brian Jones died from the Rolling Stones. So he was, I guess, the first of the Rolling Stones that joined the group after Brian's death. Another famous alumnus of the Blues Breakers is Jeff Beck, who I got to see at the time that they came out with an album called Truth, which was really a great album. And at that time, a couple people from that group. Here's a picture of it. That's him with Rod Stewart singing. And Ron Wood was also there. Ron Wood and Rod Stewart ended up in the Small Faces, and then eventually Ron Wood joined the Rolling Stones, so he's enshrined in the Rolling Stones, if not embalmed in them this time. Peter Green was another great blues guitarist that was in the Blues Breakers, and he started a band called the Fleetwood Mac. If many of you don't know it, before they were a pop group in like around 75, they came up with a couple of really great blues albums, which I enjoyed. They were great in concert. And then maybe the most famous alumnus of the Blues Breakers is Eric Clapton, who's here with Ginger Baker in the background, and I get to see Cream at a couple concerts there. This is the poster for that concert, and it was time that Wheels of Fire came out and Disraeli Gears was out, and I found out that they were like the platinum album of Wheels of Fire was the best-selling double album of all time, so that's kind of interesting. This is a bit more obscure, but this is a concert for Jethro Tull. But Savoy Brown is the group that was another really great blues band at the time. There's a picture of the concert with this strange-looking guy that wore a top hat and always had a cigar in his hand. But they had a lot of different people in the group, and at this time, probably the best period that they had with the different people in the group. Kim Simmons on the right just played a couple of weeks ago. My friend Carl Henry opened for him up in Callahan's, and I went on the web and looked up some pictures because my friend was going to be there, and I thought, this guy looks about as much like a blues rock star as I do now. But they were a great band. They were fun. And one of their great songs was she's got a ring on his nose and a ring on her hand. That was one of the great ones. Jethro Tull was really, I think, one of the best groups of that period. I got to see them actually at Easttown, not at the Grande Ballroom. But they just had this great mix of Baroque music and flute and all this stuff that people hadn't done, and kind of jazz and stuff, and experimental music. So it was fun seeing them. Another great treat was seeing Janis Joplin with Big Brother and the Holding Company at the Grande. I got to see her at Chrysler Arena too, and post Big Brother, but it just wasn't the same as the intimacy of the Grande Ballroom with her original group and stuff. I don't know if any of you know who Arthur Brown is, but he used to come out and do his thing where he put a flaming headpiece on, and at once, I guess, fuel from it, dripped down him and lit him on fire and stuff like that. And that didn't happen at the concert I attended, but he was actually pretty good. I like that album. One of my absolute favorite groups of all time was Procol Harum, which I'm really glad I got to see, because they kind of faded into oblivion. I think that's them fading into oblivion. But they had on their album A Whiter Shade of Pale to be listened to in the spirit in which it was created or something like that. I'm seeing all these people nod their heads. Wow, I guess I'm not as old as I thought I was. Quicksilver Messenger Service. I don't know, they had sort of the shtick going and everything from San Francisco, but I wasn't that thrilled with them. I think they had What You Gonna Do About Me and Fresh Air, to have another hit of Fresh Air and stuff. I think they were smoking something besides that. But at any rate, they were a good group, but they didn't throw me that much. Same thing with Spirit. They had the song Fresh Garbage, and I learned that Led Zeppelin was heavily influenced by them. I didn't know that. Apparently, like the 12 Dreams of Dr. Sardonicus is considered like one of the rock operas with Tommy and Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, but it's certainly not as memorable. I guess I'm going to have to check it out if we have it at the library. Carol's into some of this stuff. She's. I had a concert picture of Moby Grape, but since I didn't attend it, I just wanted to put stuff I'd attended up here. And it came back in ILL. Larry Freyer brought it to me yesterday and said, somebody had gotten this out at ILL. It was the Moby Grape CD. But they were actually pretty good, too. The dark side here was Steppenwolf. I mean, I wasn't that thrilled with Steppenwolf. I think this was meant to sort of reflect his doppelganger aura or something like that. But I don't know, they seemed kind of mechanical in their performance. But it was at the time Magic Carpet Ride came out, and I'll always remember that because I remember driving down to Fort Wayne for my draft induction exam, and in a rented Volkswagen Beetle with this song blasting out. So I'll always remember that. One of my absolute favorite groups was the band. Same people that had toured and backed up Dylan in his electric tour of England. And I got to see them both here and at the Chrysler Arena, and again at the Grande Ballroom. It was just so much better. I was right up close to the stage, and Garth Hudson, the guy that looked like he came out of the Pioneer from the West, blasting out Chest Fever on his Hammond B organ, and it still sends shivers up and down my spine. Traffic was a great band. Steve Winwood, who a lot of people probably know his name, was the leader of the group. It had Dave Mason in it at that time, and Are You Feeling All Right, and 40,000 Headmen, and of course the classic on Dear Mr. Fantasy. Great seeing that. Vanilla Fudge was a group that, I don't know, they became really popular. I couldn't figure out why, but I went there because they were opening for Led Zeppelin. At least I think I remember that. And I was standing right by the stage, and they were the loudest band I'd ever heard. They were not creative. And I thought, what are a bunch of white guys with long hair doing covering, You Keep Me Hanging On? I thought it just didn't seem right. But at any rate, they opened up for Led Zeppelin, at least I thought. I couldn't find a playbill that demonstrated this, but, Led Zeppelin was by far more creative, and I remember, like Jimmy Page, playing his electric guitar with a bow like a cello and stuff like that, so that was fun. So this poster was supposedly a poster that where Sun Ra opened for Led Zeppelin, but I think you have to be on psychedelics to see Led Zeppelin in there. So, I'm not ready to take another trip to find out, but probably the best concert, well, it won't be the best concert, but one of the most memorable was The Who, and The Who had practiced for a week, and they did their premiere of Tommy, the rock opera Who there. I got to see that, but really, the Joe Cocker and the Grease Band opened up, and they were really popular at the time. They became known as Mad Hatters and Englishmen later. But Chris Stanton on guitar was a great blues guitar player. And really, the highlight of the evening for me was Leon Russell, who I love. I got to see him later in Green, Texas, at one of the oldest, if not the oldest, roadhouse in Texas. But he did a set by himself, and I can see him in the spotlight. I was going to try to find a picture of it with a beer on his piano, singing a song for you. And that was just one of the most memorable experiences of my life. So, at any rate, those are my trips to the Grande Ballroom.